May 22nd, 2011. It started as an ordinary Sunday. By nightfall, it would be remembered as the deadliest single tornado in modern American history. 158 lives gone, a quarter of a city erased. But the numbers alone don't tell the story. To understand what really happened that day, we need to look at the hours, the minutes, the seconds, the choices people made, the ones they never had a chance to make. The year 2011 had already pushed the country to its limits. By late spring, the atmosphere was acting in ways meteorologists had rarely seen. In April alone, nearly 360 tornadoes carved through the southern and eastern United States in a single 4-day stretch. Textbooks would later call it the 2011 super outbreak. Towns from Mississippi to Virginia were already mourning when the calendar turned to May. People were exhausted, worn down by sirens, worn down by survival. That fatigue would matter. Joplin, Missouri sits in the southwestern corner of the state, a working-class city of about 50,000. On the morning of May 22nd, the weather looked unremarkable. Families were dressed in their Sunday best. The high school graduation ceremony had been moved to Missouri Southern State University, a few miles from the high school campus. 400 seniors, caps and gowns, cameras flashing, mothers crying the good kind of tears. 190 miles to the west, the sky was beginning to stir. At 1:30 p.m., the Storm Prediction Center issued Tornado Watch number 341. The probability listed was 15%. For a city in tornado country, that number didn't sound like much. Just another spring afternoon, just another watch. Familiarity has a way of dulling instincts. And in Joplin, the instincts had been dulled for years. By 4 p.m., radar told a different story. A thunderstorm was building west of the city. It rapidly intensified, organizing into a supercell, then merging with another storm cell drifting in from the southwest. The two systems combined into a single spiraling vortex thousands of feet tall. The air inside began to rotate like a drill bit. A mesocyclone had locked onto Joplin. At 5:09 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for Jasper and Newton counties. The countdown had begun. A high precipitation supercell hides its tornado inside walls of rain. You cannot see what is coming. You can only hear it. At 5:17 p.m., the warning was updated. 28 sirens wailed across Joplin. Emergency alerts cut into television broadcasts and crackled across weather radios. But sirens are not always heard. Windows were closed against the storm. Hills and valleys distorted the sound. Rain and hail masked the warnings before they reached the ear. A study conducted in the weeks after the disaster found that roughly 10% of Joplin residents, as many as 5,000 people, never heard a warning at all. Of those who did, 84% took the alert seriously. 77% went looking for shelter. The rest waited, the way they had waited 100 times before. At 5:29 p.m., the hook echo on radar became unmistakable. A tornado was forming. The storm chasers and meteorologists watching their screens already knew. There was no longer any question. At 5:34 p.m., the tornado touched down on the southwest edge of the city. It started as an EF1. Within minutes, it would become something else entirely. Something almost impossible to describe. The broadcast cut out. The studio lights flickered. Across the city, the sky turned a sickening shade of green, then black. The funnel was nearly invisible inside the rain, but its power was not.
Okay.
At 5:37 p.m., the tornado slammed into St. John's Regional Medical Center, a 9-story hospital. 183 patients inside, along with hundreds of staff. The staff had received the warning. They had moved patients into interior hallways. They had done everything the protocols said to do. But the tornado was now an EF4, and the building stood directly in its path. Every window on every floor blew inward. The roof was peeled away, the main power failed, the backup generators failed. Critical patients on ventilators lost support. 5 patients and 1 visitor were killed on the spot. More would die in the days that followed. The tornado kept moving. At 5:39 p.m., it reached the Greenbrier nursing home. Roughly 90 people inside, elderly residents, visitors, nurses on shift. The staff had moved everyone into the interior corridor. They had followed the plan exactly. The building was old but solid. It should have held, it did not hold. The walls came down in a matter of seconds. 21 people died inside Greenbrier. Most of them never had time to understand what was happening. At 5:40 p.m., the tornado entered the heart of Joplin. Residential streets disappeared from above. A security camera mounted on a home captured the moment the neighborhood across the street ceased to exist, frame by frame. Like an eraser pulled across a chalkboard, cars were lifted from driveways. Trees were stripped of their bark, then snapped at the base. The funnel was now well over half a mile wide, and it was still growing. Joplin High School was next. Several wings of the building were destroyed. Hallways collapsed. Classrooms filled with debris. Surveillance footage captured the moment wind tore through the corridors, ceilings caving, windows exploding inward, lockers torn from the walls. If the graduation ceremony had not been moved to the university campus that morning, 400 students and their families would have been inside. Pieces of the high school were later found more than 60 miles from the city. At 5:42 p.m., the tornado reached Harmony Heights Baptist Church. More than 50 people had taken shelter inside. The pastor was blind. He had led his congregation in worship that morning, unable to see the sky outside, but able to feel the change in pressure as the storm approached. 3 people died when the roof came down. One of them was the pastor's mother. At 5:43 p.m., the tornado reached peak intensity, winds estimated between 155 and 224 miles per hour. EF5, the highest rating on the enhanced Fujita scale. For comparison, a Formula One car at full throttle on a straightaway reaches those speeds, but here there was no track, no driver, no finish line. Just a wall of rain a mile wide moving across an American city at 30 miles per hour, grinding everything in its path into dust. The Hampshire Terrace apartment complex was hit next. 12 people died inside. Many of the bodies were not found for days. Then came Rangeline Road, Joplin's commercial corridor. In a matter of seconds, the AT&T store, the Walmart, the Pizza Hut, the Home Depot, the Academy Sports, the Dillon's grocery store, all of it. Gone. Cars were wrapped around trees. Some were hurled into nearby buildings more than 200 meters from where they had been parked. Metal twisted like foil. In one mangled car, rescuers later found an empty child's car seat. The driver was never identified. The child was never found. At the Home Depot, customers and employees had taken shelter against the back wall. The wall was reinforced concrete tilt-up panels, each weighing tens of thousands of pounds. The tornado pushed them inward. 7 people died beneath the slabs. At 5:47 p.m., the tornado struck the Fast Trip gas station on Rangeline Road. The convenience store had a walk-in beer cooler in the back. Customers and employees crammed inside, practically standing on top of one another. The audio that survived from inside that cooler is something few people can listen to all the way through. There is panic, there is prayer, there is a man's voice trying to calm a stranger's crying child. The building above them was completely destroyed. The cooler held. When the survivors crawled out into the daylight, the city they had walked into 30 minutes earlier no longer existed. Streets were unrecognizable. Familiar buildings were simply absent. The sky smelled like natural gas and wet drywall. At 5:48 p.m., the tornado crossed Interstate 44 and began to weaken. It flipped semi-trucks like toys. It scattered cars along the median. One eyewitness later said it looked like a giant had dropped its fists on the highway. By 6:12 p.m., near the small town of Diamond, the funnel finally dissipated. 38 minutes. 6 miles of destruction through a populated American city. The tornado had ground a path nearly a mile wide through the heart of Joplin. But the dying was not finished. Voices were still calling from under the rubble. People were trapped in basements that no longer had houses above them. The death toll was still climbing, and nobody knew yet how high it would go. Help poured in from every direction. Neighboring states sent emergency crews before any official request had been made. Ordinary people drove in from Kansas and Arkansas and Oklahoma with chainsaws in the back of their pickup trucks. The entire city of Joplin became a volunteer command center. Doctors performed triage in parking lots. Firefighters from other towns worked 20-hour shifts pulling bodies and survivors from the same piles of debris. When the dust settled, the scale of what Joplin had lost came into focus. 4,000 families had lost their homes. 3,500 more homes were severely damaged. Over 1,000 people were injured, more than 500 businesses destroyed, 10 schools, 2 hospitals, dozens of churches. Total damages exceeded $2.8 billion, making the Joplin tornado the costliest single tornado in American history. But no number could account for the price of a life. 158 people were killed by the tornado itself. 156 chairs sat empty at family tables that summer, and the final toll was still not in. In the days that followed, a new enemy emerged from the soil. A rare fungal infection called mucormycosis spread from the dirt and debris into open wounds and lungs. 18 confirmed cases, 5 more deaths. The storm kept killing even after the winds had stopped. And yet inside the ruin, the city found something else. Stories of people who in their final moments chose somebody else. Christopher Lucas was the manager of the Pizza Hut on Range Line Road. When the sirens started, he moved 15 customers and employees into the walk-in freezer. The freezer door would not lock from the inside, so Lucas took a leather belt, wrapped it around the door handle, looped it around his own arm, and held the door shut from the outside as the tornado bore down on the building. The freezer survived. Everyone inside survived. Christopher Lucas did not. Dean Wells worked at the Home Depot. When the warning came, he did not run. He held the door open and pushed customers toward the break room, the only interior space in the building that might offer shelter. He made trip after trip, leading strangers to safety. He was on his way back to help more people when the wall came down. He died holding a door for people he had never met. Don Lansaw and his wife Bethany lived in a small house near the city center. When the tornado hit, Don pushed Bethany into the bathtub and covered her body with his own. The house came apart around them. Bethany survived with minor injuries. Don was killed by debris that struck him in the back. Mark Lindquist was a social worker. He was visiting 3 disabled clients at a group home when the warning came. He pulled mattresses over the 3 men he was caring for, then lay down across them himself. All 3 clients died. Mark was thrown a full city block from the building. He was found in a coma, but he survived. When he finally woke up in the hospital, the first words out of his mouth were not about himself. Within 3 years, the school bells were ringing again in Joplin. The hospital reopened on the same ground where the old one had stood. Mercy Park bloomed where the ruins had been. The houses came back one by one on streets that had been wiped clean, but the memorials are still there. the quiet ones. The photographs on shelves, the empty seats at the table on holidays. The thunder that wakes survivors at night and sends them back to that afternoon. The tornado that came out of the rain and took everything in 38 minutes. The storm taught Joplin a lesson the city did not want to learn. That sirens can fail. That warnings can be missed. That the strongest walls can come down. That the people you love can be there in the morning and gone by sunset. And that no number of drills, no number of forecasts, no number of advance warnings can guarantee any of us another ordinary day. But the storm taught Joplin something else too. That when the worst arrives, ordinary people will hold doors for strangers. That a pastor will sing through the last verse of a hymn. That a man will tie his own arm to a freezer door so that the people inside can live. The tornado took nearly everything from Joplin. It could not take that. Every storm eventually ends. The houses can be rebuilt. The trees can grow back. The bells can ring again. But the way we hold each other when the sky turns black, the way strangers become family in the worst hour of a lifetime, the way one man chooses to die so that 15 others can walk out alive, that stays. That is what Joplin remembers. That is what the rest of us should remember too.